It's very easy when reading discussions about introversion to question whether you are actually an introvert at all. These doubts are caused by a mixture of how introversion is misunderstood, the celebration of social anxiety, and people getting too invested in identities and communities. So let's get into that. What happens is someone who doesn't know me too well comes to the conclusion I'm an extrovert. And I do find this totally perplexing. It tends to happen when some random person on the internet sees me producing YouTube videos or walking around Canada with a camera with a big ass mic on it and assuming I can't be an introvert. It also happens in professional circumstances. I have literally had people say to me, "It's okay for you extroverts." You know, when delivering the odd presentation, or specifically when delivering a seminar on social media and job hunting. I always remember that one because they just felt the advice didn't apply to them because they thought I was an extrovert. This mischaracterization matters because it brings up a whole host of issues around labels, identity, and how they are used in the real world today. But it's hard to discuss that until we define what an introvert is. The core truth of introversion is actually very simple. First, introversion is a core personality trait of the big five. These are openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and wait for it, neuroticism and extroversion. They are all scales people sit on at different points, and introversion is obviously part of the scale of the extroversion characteristic. And we are born with these traits. Second, it is about how you gain and lose energy. One of the best books on introversion is Quiet by Susan Cain. Susan Cain defines introversion as a preference for a quiet, more minimally stimulating environment. Like the infographic, introverts gain energy from being alone or with small groups or with a close companion. We do also tend to have a bit of focus on the meaning of the events that are swirling around us, right? That's why we do things like vlogs or journals. We lose energy from socialising in larger groups, high stimulation environments, and situations where we need to perform for long periods. And often when we don't actually have that time to process those meanings that we tend to like, and we just can't sustain it. It is true, a person's degree of introversion may change over the course of their life. I used to think that. I used to think I'd become less of an introvert as I got older. But I don't think that's true, because it's also true that their degree of introversion may actually stay consistent. And what's actually changed is a range of facets in their personality that correlate with introversion but aren't actually introversion. So as an example, I used to be very shy when I was younger, cripplingly so. I no longer am. It was actually the shyness that was the main barrier for me. Shyness may correlate with introversion, but it has nothing to do with being an introvert. It's a completely separate facet of yourself. That is it. Introversion becomes complicated only when it gets confused with other things. And some of these things are actually anxiety disorders. So let's put to one side for a minute all those incorrect memes about introverts. Let's totally ignore that the Reddit introvert community has 300k members, but the extrovert community has only 6k members. I mean, it may be that those extroverts are out busy enjoying themselves and aren't so introspective, and that explains the gap, but that is a big gap. Let's put to one side, with an ironic raising of the eyebrow worthy of Spock, the fact that all introverts on the internet are depicted to be variants of Emma Watson from different multiverses in various contemplative situations. As discussing introversion and being one has become more acceptable to the point of almost being classically cool, the facets discussed as being part of being an introvert have become distorted. It's also easy to come to the conclusion some people actually have disorders. If you experience significant nervousness and fear in social situations, or when simply thinking about such situations, that is a social anxiety disorder. You have an actual mental health issue. It's possible some anxiety disorders correlate with being introverted, but they are not the truth of being introverted. Neither are they to be celebrated as a natural part of being an introvert. Introversion is a personality trait, not a social anxiety disorder. Introversion should be something you're actually quite comfortable with. Social anxiety holds you back and causes you stress. You even see introverts focus on some weird hatred or contempt for the human species as an essential part of their introvert status. I mean, that's just some seriously toxic attitude, and there's actually a name for it: misanthropy. Social anxiety and toxic attitudes are issues to be addressed, not traits to be celebrated as part of your introvert identity. If you think about it, it's entirely possible you're an extrovert who is held back by your social anxiety. This brings us to the risk with labels, identity, and community in the modern world. Labels are essentially a taxonomy, and the purpose of a taxonomy is to aid understanding. They aid understanding by describing something and differentiating it from other things. They're a tool for analysis. If understanding introversion allows for self-discovery, to better understand and accept who you are, you can make positive life choices from it. If you take me as an example, it has allowed me to become comfortable with certain ways I work. It has allowed me to understand the solo travel that works for me and the specific types of that solo travel. And to become comfortable with the fact that I do spend an epic amount of time reading, watching, and just thinking about stuff. And that's not the same as being lonely, and that is perfectly fine. The challenge is when being introverted becomes about more than understanding yourself and gets tied up intrinsically with your link to your identity and community. At this point, the label potentially transforms from being a tool of understanding, and it risks becoming more about inclusion, and people can make some seriously distorted choices when their identity and community membership is at stake. The pursuit and need for inclusion can cease to be about expanding your horizons through self-understanding, instead about reinforcing a cage, bedding down in the mutual comfort of the community's rituals, defining borders to keep out the nefarious other, or partaking in a sort of celebratory anxiety porn. It can even get to the point that this is all self-sustaining, which is quite dangerous. When the introvert community doubles down on elements that step into the realms of social anxiety, it is dangerous ground, as there are problems to be analysed and addressed, not really an acceptable part of your introvert status. I distill the advice of this video to 5 things. First, use a label, whatever that label is, to analyse and discover things about yourself and how you relate to the world. It's an analysis tool to make you happier. Second, don't double down on the expectations of the label. You're a unique individual. Literally everyone is different. Don't live to the expectations of that label to all else. Certainly ensure you're not letting introversion be an excuse for rebelling in actual social anxiety. Third, don't let a community become something, let's face it, a bit more like a cult. By that I mean don't conform to the norms and expectations of the community around that label. Don't feel like others should police how you conform to that label. Just be yourself. And if you feel you can't in that community, leave it. Fourth, don't fall into defining yourself in relation to the other, whatever that other is. This is especially true for introversion, where it seems that people fall into the trap of the other being your fellow man. 5, understand what being an introvert is and separate that out from other elements like shyness and social anxiety, as these things vary more significant with life experience and have the potential to be addressed. I am an introvert. That does not mean I am shy. It doesn't mean I suffer anxiety in social situations. It doesn't mean I'm lacking in confidence. It doesn't mean I'm not interested in people. The truth is, I find my fellow human beings entirely fascinating. It's just I like the environment to be one where I can engage with that fascination. And I don't celebrate anxieties. Basically, being a highly functional adult without a grab bag of anxieties does not mean you're not an introvert. And that may be true of you as well. Now, if you sometimes wonder why you don't want to tell the world how you spend your time as an introvert, you can check out the video that's appeared on the screen right now. Until next time, what are your thoughts on what it means to be an introvert, and how has your understanding helped you in your life? Post those thoughts in the comments below.